Recording begins in 3, 2, and 1. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Life Edge, because life just doesn't have to be mediocre. I'm joined today by Dr. Susan Nash. Hey, Susan, how are you today?
Great. Thrilled to be here. Thrilled that we have a fantastic guest.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Here we go.
It really is. We're very, very fortunate, and we will find out why.
Here we go. And we're back. Susan, would you like to introduce our guest today?
I would love to. We have a wonderful guest, Erin Brown, who is Curator of Collections at the Pawnee Bill Ranch Museum, and she is here to talk to us today about what she does at the museum and ranch, and also about the annual Wild West show. So, Erin, welcome.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's very exciting to be here.
Well, I have quite a few questions, and I just love the fact that Pawnee, Oklahoma, is considered just sort of like it's really a historical time capsule. And I thought that I'd start by asking you, what exactly is the mission of the Pawnee Bill Ranch, and also, like, who was Pawnee Bill?
Okay, yeah, sure. So Pawnee Bill's real name was Gordon William Lilly, and he was not a Pawnee Indian, nor was he originally from Pawnee, but he was born in Bloomington, Illinois, and lived there until he was a young man, and then he made his way to this area, and he worked actually for the Bureau of Indian Affairs as a teacher for the Indian school here in Pawnee. And in 1883, Buffalo Bill Cody, William F. Cody, otherwise known as Buffalo Bill, the famous Western legend, started this phenomenon known as the Wild West show. And he, of course, needed people to come work for him in this newly developed show. And so he wrote a letter to the Pawnee Indian agent at the time and requested a troop of Pawnee Indians to come work for him. And Pawnee Bill also signed up and went along with them because he could speak Pawnee. He could act as an interpreter. And so he started out working for Buffalo Bill Cody in his Wild West show, and he worked for him for a few years, about 5, and decided, you know what, I love this, I can do it on my own. And so he started his own traveling Wild West show, starring his wife May as a sharpshooter. And May and Pawnee Bill had a Wild West show from 1888 to about 1907. And then Pawnee Bill and his old mentor, Buffalo Bill, merged their two one point was competitive shows into one, and they formed the largest Wild West show in the world, and it was called Buffalo Bill's Wild West and Pawnee Bill's Great Far East, and it lasted till about 1913. So Pawnee Bill built this ranch in Pawnee, Oklahoma. It was originally about 2,000 acres. He was quite an entrepreneur. So in addition to the Wild West shows, he was very involved in a lot of other industries and areas, such as real estate and banking and ranching. He was very motivated to help preserve the bison. At one time, there were about 50 to 60 million buffalo in North America, and by about 1900, they were virtually extinct. And he believed strongly in the bison's importance to the history of the American West and Plains Indian culture, and so he worked really hard to try to preserve them. And he was instrumental in lobbying Congress to pass legislation to protect the animal. And so he started a buffalo ranch here in Pawnee. So he had a mansion, a blacksmith shop, a log cabin, and about 2,000 acres. So the state of Oklahoma currently administers the Pawnee Bill Ranch. We still own 500 acres of the original ranch site, and there are a lot of things that people can see here. We are a working ranch, so we have a herd of bison longhorn, and draft horses. We have a modern museum as well as the historic home, Pawnee Bill's Mansion, that you can tour. We have several outbuildings such as the blacksmith shop, the 1910 log cabin, an observation tower, and the historic big barn, which my office is in right now. But it houses a billboard from 1901 that's 70 by 10 feet that advertised a one-day show, and it's the only existing barnside billboard that we know of in the world, and so it's housed in our barn. So the mission here at the ranch is to preserve, collect, and interpret history and material culture as it relates to Pawnee Bill and the Wild West shows. So
how did you wind up as a curator there?
What was that?
How did you wind up as a curator there?
Well, I always wanted to work in applied history as a child. I loved museums. I was obsessed with Little House on the Prairie. I wanted to be Laura Ingalls Wilder. I was her for Halloween every year until I was way too old to be dressing up for Halloween. But I just I was fascinated by that idea of public history, of living history, of making history accessible to the public. And so I always wanted to work in a museum and was very interested also in the education aspect of history. And so I started out working here about 16 and a half years ago as a historical interpreter, which meant that I was responsible for interpreting the site to the public. So giving tours, working in public programming, developing programs, and just greeting people on an everyday basis. And then in about 2005, I became curator.
That's great.
That's so wonderful. I think that, well, I have so many thoughts, and so but I thought, okay, for our viewers who may not know exactly where Pawnee, Oklahoma is, and also where the Pawnee Indians originally were and where they came from, you might give us a little bit of background about the Pawnee Nation and that history and their relationship also to the buffalo or the bison.
Okay, yeah. So the Pawnees were originally from Nebraska. And during Indian removal, they were forcibly removed from Nebraska and put on a reservation here in what is now Pawnee. So Pawnee Bill actually met them when they were wintering in Wellington, Kansas. He was visiting his cousins in Kansas and met the Pawnees. And then when they moved on down to Pawnee, Pawnee Bill came and actually lived with a Pawnee Indian doctor named Blue Hawk. And he developed like a father-son relationship with Blue Hawk and considered him like, a surrogate father, and then named his ranch Blue Hawk Peak after Blue Hawk. The Pawnee Nation is still headquartered in Pawnee. And yeah, the buffalo, of course, are very important to Plains Indian culture. They supplied almost everything that the Plains Indians needed to survive, and it was also important for ceremonial, religious aspects in their lives as well. And now Pawnee is located in north central Oklahoma, so we're about 60 miles west of Tulsa.
I just think it's fascinating, and I think that one thing about the Pawnee that's really interesting is, well, two things that just jump out to me. One, that they were one of the tribes that one of the nations whose language is used in intelligence as the code talkers. And then second, that their ceremonies for their I guess higher being, they had a lot of ceremonies where they worshipped, I guess their god's name was Kirawa. I'm going to put my foot in my mouth. But then also the morning star, which seems really fascinating to me. And I don't know exactly if any of those beliefs or traditions were brought into the Wild West show, or what the Pawnee's role was in the Wild West show. But I think that would be really fascinating, because it was such a way of disseminating information about the Pawnees to the rest of the world. Wait, 25 years is a long time to have a Wild West show. So that was the major way that a lot of people found out about Pawnees, I would imagine.
Yeah, you're right. I think the significance of the Wild West show, in a large perspective, is that it created the perception of what the West was for the rest of the United States and the world. So certainly the Wild West shows didn't present the most accurate depiction of, reality. It was sensationalized and it was glamorized and it was made much more exciting for the paying public, just like movies, are today. So I wouldn't consider what the Wild West show actually presented as accurate in terms of historical accuracy, and especially in terms of how Native Americans were presented in the Wild West show. So Pawnee Bill mostly employed Pawnees and Sioux Indians. And it's interesting, I was just going back through a route book the other day. We have what are called route books, which are basically diaries that somebody would be responsible for recording during a tour. So there would be somebody whose job it was to write down everything that happened every day. And we also have programs that people could buy, just like a souvenir program when you go somewhere today that you can buy. Well, they had that back then. And in it, there was a whole page listing, it was just called Indian language. And so it would list, English and then a phonetic representation of Indian language. Well, we, of course, know that each tribe has a very distinct language, but I did look at it, and it was Pawnee. So they were representing Pawnee language as Indian language in the Wild West show. So certainly there's a lot of very interesting research avenues and ways that you can explore the Wild West show and the history of the Wild West show and Native American the Native American influence in the Wild West show and the ways that Native Americans were portrayed in the Wild West show is definitely one of those very fascinating aspects.
Do you get a lot of people on a yearly basis coming to see the museum?
Well, we actually have a counter on our front entrance gate, and we're not just a museum. So, like I said, we have a drive-through exhibit pasture, and we have a children's fishing pond, and we're a day-use facility, so you can come in and rent an area for your family reunion or party. We have lots of weddings here, but we average between 45 to 50,000 people in the gates a year, and we are in very rural Oklahoma, so we consider that to be a lot of people.
That's great. Could you describe the Wild West show? Because I know it's coming up.
Yeah, the Wild West show this year is June 10th and 11th. It's always the second weekend in June. And we like to call the Wild West show the best of Pawnee Bill. So we don't try to represent one particular year show like the 1907 show or the 1910 show. We like to try to take the best of the entire span of his career and combine it into one show and try to do that in as close as we can in 2016. So we will have trick roping, trick riding, trick shooting, and some of the acts that were probably the most famous from his show, like a stagecoach robbery, football on horseback, those kind of things that you would expect to see in a Wild West show. It's about a 2-hour show, and it's great family fun. We call it family fun at its wildest.
Football on horseback, I'd never heard of that. Now that would be interesting.
Yeah, they actually did that back then. They have a huge inflatable ball that they stick in the middle of the arena, and of course you've got one side over here on horseback and the other team, and they try to push it and make a goal on each end of the arena.
That sounds fun.
It's hilarious.
The stagecoach robbery sounds like fun too.
It is. Of course, we have good guys and bad guys, and most of our cast loves to be the bad guy, so we have to, break it up a little bit and have the good guys and the bad guys, but Pawnee Bill always saves the day.
Oh, I love that. Well, so what are some of the plans for the museum and also the ranch and the basic the exhibits in the show?
Well, we have a lot more ideas than we have money. So we always have a lot of good plans, but we stay very busy with our visitors, especially starting in April through August, or I would say March through August. All we can really do is meet our visitors' needs. So we give a lot of tours. We see a lot of children. We offer a lot of hands-on, really fun educational programming for our field trips, and we stay very busy with that. And then in the fall, it gets a little bit slower, and then we turn our attention to taking care of the things that, the public doesn't see every day. So that's when we deep clean a lot of our artifacts and work on cataloging things and making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do. We have the public's trust to take care of our collection, and we take that very seriously. And so we do a lot of that in the off season. We're working on an exhibit right now. Actually worked on it through the winter, and I'll probably work on it again as it gets a little bit slower, talking about Pawnee Bill's life through the lens of pop culture, and how he was influenced by pulp fiction and dime novels, stage melodramas that depicted the West, and sort of how he turned that into his own pop culture phenomenon, and then how the Wild West shows influenced pop culture from there on through TV westerns and movies and fiction as well.
I always find it interesting how many.
Oh, go ahead, Rick.
I'm sorry. I just always found it interesting how many of the Western heroes, if you will, married into Indian tribes. Quite a few of them, actually.
Yeah, it was very common. Pawnee Bill's Wild West show, one of our favorite things to do when we have time or read route books. And Pawnee Bill referred to his Wild West show as an ethnological congress because he brought in the great Far East. So you had people from Asia, Africa, the Middle East, Eastern Europe, even indigenous Australians. So it was just this, 500 people from all over the world. And when you read route books, that's one of the most entertaining things, I think, to see who's marrying who's falling in love with who's running off from with who and leaving the show, and who's having an affair. It's just there was a lot of marriage between cultures, and certainly between American Indians and not only Caucasian people from our country, but from all over.
Yeah.
Well, I just find it to be really, really interesting to think about what you're working on now, the representations of Wild West shows in pop culture and the sort of mutual appropriations. That's so fascinating, and the influence. And think about, like, for example, the dime novels and the fact that they were extremely popular in, say, purchase in train stations, and people would read them in the train and get these really wild and exciting ideas about the West.
Right, yeah. I think Pawnee Bill starred in over 20 dime novels, but he also grew up reading dime novels that starred Buffalo Bill, and he didn't want to be like that. He wanted to be the star of his own dime novel. I mean, that was really his goal. He wanted to be a star. And he's really an excellent example of a self-made person. He had a vision of what he wanted his life to be, and he made it happen, which is really, I think, inspiring and interesting. And certainly Wild West shows have an important place in American culture. And again, we have people visit from all over the world. There are certain places where American, the history of the American West is extremely popular, certain places in the world, and we have those visitors here. The vision that they have of the American West can be traced directly to the Wild West show. So Wild West shows were, extremely influential on, when people think of Oklahoma, they have a certain stereotype in their head, and I think it can be traced directly to the Wild West show because that influenced TV, where a lot of people then got their opinion of the West.
I really just find it fascinating because, first, some of the elements you have, like the white hat, black hat, good, evil, etc. But then, and then also the idea of, like, treasure coming along on stagecoach across the West, just perfectly situated to be plucked by bandits, and just the idea of adventure and adversity, and being in nature and thinking of having to interact with the animals, and all those things that really kind of encompass some of the ideas that we think are quintessentially American. They're kind of inventions of the Wild West show.
Exactly. I think it really was, it's uniquely American. I mean, the Wild West show is uniquely American. And that just made, when you were talking, I just thought of a quote that we had found that we're planning on using in this pop culture exhibit, where Steven Spielberg was interviewed by the BBC, and he said, basically Star Wars is a Western. If there hadn't been those early day Westerns that I grew up watching, there would have been no Star Wars. Well, of course, there would have been no Westerns had there never been a Wild West show. So I love that connection to modern movies, even that you wouldn't typically think there would be, but there actually is.
Exactly. Oh, that's great.
Right. Yeah. You think of somebody like George Lucas, who, when he came up with Star Wars, said,
"Yeah, George Lucas."
Oh, yeah. But he was saying he watched Japanese movies, and some of that influenced the character development, and then later, of course, some of the other stuff. And I've been reading some books recently by an old science fiction writer, Jack Williamson, and I'm seeing where Star Trek got a lot of its ideas from. So it's amazing where all this stuff comes from. And it's a lot of fun. The Wild West dime books, really, I've had a chance to read some of them when I was growing up. They were pretty interesting. They definitely glamorized everything.
Adventure and excitement, and there's always danger. So you can definitely imagine how exciting it was for people to read them back then. And I always like to point out too to visitors, because when people went to a Wild West show, it was the biggest thing in entertainment. They didn't have movies or television, and so you really just had an idea of what people looked like based on your neighbors or who you had an opportunity to see every day. But to go to a Wild West show and see people from all over the world and representing all these different cultures and all these different places was a huge draw for an audience, because there wasn't any other way to see somebody else who wasn't exactly like you. So that's another reason why Wild West shows were really popular.
Oh, and the wonderful costumes, too.
Yeah, wonderful costumes. And, there were some accurate depictions of lifestyle, and maybe some certain characters were made famous by the Wild West show, too, like Annie Oakley and, May Lily, Pawnee Bill, Johnny Baker. But for the most part, they were sort of sensationalized and definitely a lot of fun for the paying public.
So did Annie Oakley actually exist?
Oh, yeah. She was born Phoebe Ann Moses, and she worked for Buffalo Bill Cody for many years. She actually traveled with Pawnee Bill for 1 year, 1889, I think that's right. She traveled with him for a season and then went back to working for Buffalo Bill. So she was a real person, the little sure shot. Yeah, an amazing trick shooter.
So it sounds like May and Annie Oakley were both very good at the gun.
They were, yeah. May was a rifle shot. She shot off the back of a Mustang. And Annie Oakley did both, but she was more well known for being a ground shot. She would shoot on the ground. So I love, I think, the whole, women's history aspect of the Wild West show, where you had these cowgirls who were coming in and really behaving in a way that was not typical of women back then, where a woman's sphere was definitely domestic. You had these women that were riding bucking broncs, and they were shooting, and they were just doing kind of crazy things. And so that really, I guess, changed the way people thought about what a woman was capable of doing as well.
Oh, definitely. So interesting. Well, so I have a question for you, which we ask all our guests, because we call our show Life Edge. So we'd like to know what it is that you consider something that has given you an edge, or a life edge for living.
I think that I think working as a collection specialist, I have made my living out of noticing the very smallest of things. So, like everything that we have here from, has a number and has an object record and has a place. And so I've spent, a lot of my career noticing the beauty of everything, and the value of a lot of things. And so I think my perspective has really been shaped by that. I absolutely love to be outside. I find a lot of peace from just noticing, the small things in life, from a sunset to a sunrise to, a little doily here at the Pawnee Bill Ranch. So I think that there's beauty in every person and in most everything.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that philosophy. That's very unique, too.
It's very good. Well, we are almost at the end of our time. This is really fascinating. If people want to go to see the museum and the ranch and everything, what's the best way to find out more about it and or get in touch with you?
Well, you can certainly go to our website, which is www.pawneebillranch.com, and there are links on there to our Wild West Show information and our hours of operation and our fees. So that's probably the best way. You can also call us at 918-762-2513 to find out more information about the ranch and to order Wild West Show tickets if you're interested. We're located 1/2 mile west of Pawnee on Highway 64. Pretty easy to find if you know where Tulsa is or you know where Pawnee is. We'd love to have you. Right now we're open 7 days a week. So we see a lot of people right now. Starting in November, we'll be closed on Mondays and Tuesdays through March. So April through October, we're open 7 days a week.
Sounds great.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Well, I'm glad you could make it. It's always a pleasure to meet people like you. And we hope
Thank you
you
so
have
much.
a very
It's been great.
and we hope you have a very
really
successful
appreciate it.
show this year. It sounds fun.
Thank you.
Well, anyway,
Well,
if
thank
you're
you.
watching the show, please subscribe, and we will put in the show notes how to get in touch, and we'll put the website there too if you want to visit. And for Susan and I, thank you very much for living life on the edge a little bit. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.